They read my name under the chandeliers like a promise, honoring Dr. Rachel Palmer. And for a second, I actually believed this night would be simple. A toast, a plaque, a photo where my smile looks easy. Then I ducked into the restroom to catch my breath and collided with my past in lipstick and pearls. She was at the mirror, perfect as a portrait. My mother, the woman I hadn't seen in almost 15 years. Her hand paused mid-swipe when our eyes met in the glass. Her face didn't crack. It calcified. "Rachel?" she said. Cool, polished, like we were neighbors, not estranged. "I didn't expect to see you." I anchored my fingers around my clutch so I wouldn't shake. "Same," I said. "What brings you here?" She turned. Impeccable posture, that practiced tilt of the chin. "Your father and I support education causes." She let the sentence hang, an expensive earring swinging in silence. "And you?" "I'm being honored tonight." I held her gaze. "Research and education." Something flickered. Surprise, quickly smothered. "Well," she murmured, turning back to the mirror. "Everyone finds their way eventually." The line slid under my ribs like a blade, and suddenly I was 19 again. Standing in our museum-quiet living room with a community college acceptance letter and a father pacing like a prosecutor. "This family has standards," he'd hissed, the word standards hitting like a gavel. "If you're determined to waste your life, you'll do it without our help." He meant it. One duffel bag, one slammed door, one mother scrolling through her phone like I was static in the room. No hug. No, "Are you sure?" Just fronts. Back then, the pressure at home had been a silent avalanche. Be perfect, smile prettier, never falter. When I whispered that the sadness felt heavy and constant, I got a lecture, not help. "What do you possibly have to be sad about?" she'd asked, irritation braided through concern. My slipping grades weren't a signal. They were an embarrassment. I wasn't a girl who needed support. I was a stain to be scrubbed out, so I learned the logistics of survival. A friend's squeaky pull-out couch, a double shift at the diner that smelled permanently of coffee and bleach, community college at dawn, homework under a buzzing fluorescent kitchen light at midnight. The life of someone no longer belonging to a family, only to a schedule. Chemistry hooked me first. Not because it was easy, because it was honest. Balance a reaction, and the numbers tell you if you've done it right. No silent rules. No moving goalposts. I studied until the formulas were a second language, until the periodic table felt like an atlas out of a country I didn't want to visit anymore. I still remember the first exam they passed back face down. I flipped mine, braced for the familiar crash, and saw a 92. It wasn't perfect. It was mine. In that cramped classroom, the ceiling tiles suddenly looked like sky. The more I worked, the more the ground steadied. The shy kid who hunched in the last row started answering questions. I taught myself to breathe without waiting for a verdict. By the time I finished my associates, I wasn't just passing classes, I was rebuilding a self. Then I transferred. Bigger lab benches, harder problems, longer nights. I split my days between lectures, an internship washing glassware at a local research lab, and a part-time job because rent doesn't care about your dreams. Each little win stacked against every old insult until the pile finally cast its own shadow. And yet, silence from home. No congratulations when I pinned my honor cords to my gown. No call to ask what came next. At graduation, I scanned the crowd out of habit, knowing better. The only person waving like her arm might fly off was Aunt Lydia, my mother's irreverent, soft-hearted younger sister, the family's resident eccentric. She smelled like vanilla and rebellion and squeezed me so tight my ribs squeaked. "You did it, kid," she whispered. "On your terms." That hug fed me for months. The rest came from work, from mentors who saw stubbornness as grit, from the way a clean result can be a love letter to your future self. One afternoon, Dr. Collins, old-school chemist, tie always just a little crooked, pulled me aside. "You have something rare," he said. "How would you feel about Oxford? Environmental chemistry. Real impact." I laughed, then realized he wasn't joking. The application felt like writing a dare to the universe. The acceptance email, "We are pleased to inform you," felt like the universe answering back. I told only Aunt Lydia. I boarded a plane with a backpack, bruised hope, and no forwarding address. Oxford was lonely at first. Accents to decode, rain that crawled inside your sleeves, nights where the lab hum was my only companion. But if hardship had been my mother tongue, research became the translation. I finished a master's, kept going. Pushed into a PhD because the questions kept multiplying, and so did I. Years later, Cambridge opened its doors, and I walked through them, blinking like someone who didn't trust good news. I taught, I mentored. I stood in front of rooms and watched younger versions of me realize they might belong after all. And still, somewhere in the back of my mind, a closed door. No calls from home. No letters. No, we were wrong. All of that, the couch, the coffee, the clean test, the rain, the lectures, came rushing back under those ballroom lights as my mother adjusted her lipstick and treated me like a stranger. She drifted out to the clink of crystal and clever laughter, and I followed minutes later to the swell of applause. The host said my name. Cameras blinked. The stage gleamed like a finish line and a starting gun at once. I told myself to breathe, to stand on my own 2 feet and accept what I'd fought for without shrinking, without looking over my shoulder. And then the host's voice brightened. We're thrilled to announce an extraordinary surprise. An anonymous donor has pledged a $2 million grant to support tonight's honoree's ongoing work. The room inhaled at once. So did I, 2 million. The number rang like a bell in my bones, and somewhere near the back of the ballroom, a chair scraped. A man rose fast, jaw tight, and cut for the exit like the room had started to burn. My father. I felt the air thin. Applause blurred into static. Because whatever that grant meant for my work, I suddenly knew this night was not just a celebration. It was a fuse. If you're hooked so far, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Drop a like if you're feeling the tension building, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if your past walked into your biggest night? I froze at the podium, applause clattering around me like hail on glass. The host's words, $2 million grant, still echoed in my ears when I noticed him. My father, cutting through the crowd, shoulders rigid, face carved with contempt. He didn't even wait to hear the name. Didn't stay to see the daughter he'd disowned standing under the lights. The man who once told me I was an embarrassment couldn't stomach the possibility that I might have become something else. The host's voice rose again, sharp and jubilant. And this grant is made possible by one of the leading companies in sustainable chemistry, Mosaic Fertilizers. I swear my heart stopped. Mosaic Fertilizers. My father's empire. The irony crashed into me so hard I nearly staggered. The same man who threw me out with a duffel bag, the same man who never called, who never congratulated me, was the anonymous benefactor funding my recognition. He had walked out because he hadn't realized, until the words landed, that his money, his company, was tied to me. The applause felt muffled, like I was hearing it underwater. All I could hear was the memory of him, years ago, sneering in our living room. This family has standards, and you'll never live up to them. Now here I was, his failure, his discarded daughter, being crowned with a title he couldn't buy, and it was his fortune fueling it. I didn't remember stepping off the stage, but suddenly I was in the hallway, heels clicking too fast, breath jagged. I needed to see him, needed to say something. Outside, by the valet circle, I spotted him. His hand on the car door, shoulders like a wall. Dad. My voice cracked across the night. He turned slowly, and for a moment I thought I saw something. Regret, softness. But no, just bitterness. Familiar as a scar. What is it now, Rachel? His words snapped like ice. Do you think I'm going to congratulate you? Accept that you've somehow proven me wrong? I stopped a few feet away, chest burning. I didn't know the grant was from Mosaic. I didn't ask for your money. I never asked for anything from you. His mouth twisted. Doesn't matter. You're still the girl I kicked out. No award changes that. For years, those words would have gutted me. Tonight, they just hardened something inside. I straightened, every syllable sharp. You're right about one thing. I was the girl you kicked out, but I'm not her anymore. I built this life without you, and I don't need your approval now." His jaw clenched, and for a second I thought he'd fire back, another barb to sink under my skin. But instead, he just gave a bitter, hollow laugh, shook his head, and slid into his car. The door slammed, the engine roared, and just like that, he was gone again. But this time, the silence didn't leave me empty. It left me burning, because I realized the real power in this story wasn't his rejection. It was what I did next. If you've ever faced someone who doubted you, hit that like button, because Chapter 3 is where the revenge begins. That night, sleep never came. I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my hotel suite, the number $2 million burning behind my eyes. Everyone at the gala thought I'd won a crown, but it felt more like a chain, because now my greatest professional victory was stamped with his name. Mosaic Fertilizers, my father's legacy. The same man who had called me worthless, who walked out of the room before they could even say my name, was technically the reason I stood on that stage. I refused to let him own even a corner of my triumph. By morning, the decision was clear. If my father thought I'd bask in the glow of his money, he was dead wrong. I called the foundation and made arrangements. Every cent of that grant, all $2 million, was redirected. Not to my lab. Not to Cambridge. Not to anything that would tie me back to him. Instead, it would fund full-ride scholarships for underprivileged students. Kids who had been told, like me, that they weren't good enough. Students who needed someone to believe in them when the world didn't. I imagined a girl sitting in a cramped bedroom, clutching her acceptance letter, wondering how she'd ever afford to step foot on campus. I imagined a boy staring at his shoes after a teacher told him he'd never make it. Those were the people who deserved this money, not me, and certainly not the man who tried to bury me under his standards. When I pressed the final confirmation button, a calm I'd never known washed over me. For the first time, I felt untethered from him completely. His rejection had once been my cage. Now his fortune was fueling someone else's freedom. That was my revenge. Not shouting. Not proving him wrong in some boardroom showdown. My revenge was taking the very thing he valued most, his money, his reputation, and transforming it into something he'd never understand. Compassion. Weeks later, a journalist reached out. They wanted to comment about the newly established Palmer Foundation scholarships, funded by a redirected grant. I gave them one line, steady and clear. Legacies aren't built on money. They're built on what you choose to do with it. And when the article ran, my father's name was nowhere. Mine was. As I walked across the quad at Cambridge that evening, a group of my students waved and ran over, chattering about their latest experiment. I smiled, listening, the sting of the past finally dull, because this was my life. My choice, my legacy. I didn't need my parents' approval. I didn't need their money. I had carved my own path out of rejection, and now, that path was lighting the way for others. And that was more satisfying than any applause in a glittering ballroom could ever be. If you felt Rachel's revenge was powerful, give this story a like. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, would you have donated the $2 million or kept it to build your own future?